Welcome back, Defenders. Aren't you glad we now live in this new world of peace? Thank God the American people elected Donald Trump so the world can finally have peace. Donald Trump 2 days ago was willing to talk to Vladimir Putin to secure the peace. And he was able to get a temporary ceasefire in the air of energy and civilian infrastructure. But it's a step towards peace, which both Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin obviously want. So let's check in and see how the ceasefire is going. Russia launches massive drone attack hours after Putin agreed to Trump's ceasefire proposal. Russian forces launched 145 drones and multiple missiles against Ukraine overnight, injuring civilians. Well, that doesn't sound good. Zelensky accuses the Kremlin of rejecting the ceasefire as explosions rock Ukraine after the Trump-Putin phone call. Despite this agreement, explosions shook Ukraine just hours after Trump and Putin spoke, and air raid sirens sounded across the country, to include Russia attacking energy and civilian infrastructure. In addition to hospitals, in Sumy, a Russian drone hit a hospital. Putin promised not to bomb energy and civilian infrastructure, which he's still doing, but he never promised to not bomb hospitals. So why not? That is a picture of a hospital in Sumy on fire. Russia has been bombing all of them for the last 2.5 years. In addition, the Russians have been conducting double taps. They bomb somewhere, they wait for first responders to show up, police, firefighters, medics. They then bomb it again to try and kill as many first responders as possible. Putin didn't agree to stop doing that. A city that was hit hard 2 nights ago was Kropyvnytskaya. I'm sorry, guys, that's a difficult word to say. Kropyvnytskaya. This is where this is located on the map. It's a city of 300,000 Ukrainian civilians, and they don't have the best air defense systems. The Patriots, the NASAMS, the SAM-PTs, they're protecting the larger cities of Odessa, Kharkiv, Kyiv, Lviv. And Russia wanted to make an example of this city, bombing as many civilians as possible. So I'll link the video down below if you want to see the carnage and chaos for yourself that Russia inflicts on Ukraine every single night. And Vladimir Putin is not willing to stop. And there's nothing Donald Trump can say or do to make him stop attacking civilians. For a report on the ground in the city of Kyiv, this is friend of the channel, Kaylin Robertson.
Right now, Ukraine is under a huge drone and missile attack. And tonight, the capital here in Kyiv has had air raid alerts non-stop. And this is happening hours after Trump's peace talks and ceasefire talks with Putin. And the only thing that's actually been agreed in these peace talks is that Ukraine basically stops bombing Russian oil refineries. And Putin has managed to convince Trump to do that because that's all Russia has left. All Russia has left is to be able to extract oil and gas from their natural resources and sell it to the EU and use it to pump up fuel for their tanks that are murdering Ukrainians in this country. And that is what he managed to convince Trump to go along with. And that is the only agreement that has happened tonight, to basically stop Ukraine bombing Putin's cash machines.
It was a week and a half ago that Ukraine offered this ceasefire across the front lines. And Ukraine didn't want to do it. They didn't think it was to their advantage without security guarantees. But Donald Trump applied pressure on Ukraine to offer this 30-day interim ceasefire across the front lines. And Russia's not accepting it. Russia is rejecting it. Here are some tweets from Boris Johnson. What a surprise. Putin rejects an unconditional ceasefire. He wants to keep bombing and killing innocent Ukrainians. He wants Ukraine disarmed. He wants Ukraine neutralized. He wants to make Ukraine a vassal state of Russia. He isn't negotiating. He's laughing at us. Vladimir Putin is laughing at Donald Trump. He's so stupid. Kyiv and Moscow trade blame on energy ceasefire violation right after the Trump-Putin phone call. The Kremlin has accused Ukraine of derailing the ceasefire on energy targets agreed to on Tuesday. So, of course, the Russians are going to say this is Ukraine's fault. The Russians launched the drones and the missiles first. They attacked energy and civilian infrastructure, and Ukraine that same night also responded by going after an oil refinery in Krasnodar. Why not? There wasn't a real ceasefire. It doesn't exist. Here's the video of the oil refinery or oil depot in Krasnodar that caught fire. I'll put the video down below. Russian military accuses Ukraine of undermining energy truce with oil depot strike. Here's the correct headline from Politico. Trump fails to get Putin to stop the shooting. Where's the leverage? Where is the pressure? Donald Trump right now is giving concession after concession after concession. He's just giving the Russians everything they want, hoping they'll be nice and they'll stop killing people. If you watch this channel, you know the truth. You knew this was not going to work out. But we still have to talk about it. We still have to report this nonsense. Kremlin supporters celebrate Trump's negotiations as Russia rejects full ceasefire and continues their attacks. So here they are on Kremlin State TV celebrating every single day that Trump is basically on their side. Here's what this commentator on Solovyov's show said yesterday. To surmise what I said about negotiations with Trump, our demands were truly outlined. There can be a ceasefire only if weapon deliveries stop, including air defense missiles, as well as intelligence sharing and mobilization in Ukraine. So Ukraine has to completely give up on their military. Stop defending themselves, stop mobilizing, stop resupplying. Just militarily neutralize yourself, and then Russia will consider a full ceasefire across the front lines. If this is done, then we can start talking. Solovyov says, then we can talk. Secondly, our goodwill gesture about halting strikes against the energy infrastructure, everything that should have been destroyed was already destroyed there. As far as the electricity, oil, and gas, basically we can wait it out for 30 days. They won't be able to restore anything in 30 days. We'll see what comes of it in 30 days. At least it brought Donald some pleasure. Now we can talk about it. This is the Russians admitting on Kremlin State TV they don't care about a ceasefire on energy and civilian infrastructure because they've already destroyed 70 to 80% of it. They've already blown up all of Ukraine's thermal power plants. It's just their 3 nuclear power plants remaining, and Russia has been hesitant to bomb them because radiation blows everywhere. So this is the Russians saying Putin only agreed to this 30-day ceasefire in the air on energy infrastructure so that Trump would have something positive to say, something Trump could brag about that he got from Putin. When they're just going to violate it anyways if it's convenient to them, they don't care. They think Trump's an idiot. According to The Telegraph, Ukraine's strikes on Russian oil refineries made a difference. This is what Putin agreed to. Putin agreed to Ukraine no longer bombing their oil refineries anymore. This is the only thing Putin cared about in that phone conversation with Trump. Stop attacking my money supply. Get Ukraine to stop attacking my money supply. This is going to get weird now, guys, but you need to know this. U.S. has moved beyond the minerals deal to focus on lasting ceasefire in Ukraine. So we're no longer doing the mineral deal, apparently. The mineral deal is not a thing. After failed mineral deal, Trump proposes U.S. take over Ukrainian nuclear power plants. So Trump no longer wants $500 billion of the rare earth, and now he wants Ukraine's nuclear power plants. So the public reason given, United States ownership of Ukraine's power plants would be the best protection of their energy infrastructure. What? So Russia is not directly bombing these nuclear power plants because you can't. Radiation would spew everywhere. So what is the immediate concern about the United States after 3 years of warfare taking control of these nuclear power plants? Here's the White House press secretary. I'll first play the clip, and then I'll explain to you what is really going on here.
This effort and reiterated his willingness to adopt a full ceasefire. President Trump also discussed Ukraine's electrical supply and nuclear power plants. He said that the United States could be very helpful in running those plants with its electricity and utility expertise. American ownership of those plants would be the best protection for that infrastructure and support for Ukrainian energy infrastructure. President Zelensky also thanked
American ownership of Ukraine's energy infrastructure, specifically their 3 remaining nuclear power plants. One, this is a national security risk because if America controlled these nuclear power plants, they could shut off the power to force Ukraine to give concessions to Russia. So that's the immediate stupid reason why this will be rejected. But there's something much more nefarious here happening by Trump. Putin is the one telling Trump to take control of these nuclear power plants. The reason why is because if you have a civilian nuclear power program, you can easily turn that into nuclear weapons. So Ukraine at one point had 5 nuclear power plants. The Russians control the largest in Europe. This is the one in Zaporizhia. Russia is never going to give this back. So there's the 3 remaining nuclear power plants that Russia can't bomb. So they're telling Trump, take control of these 3 power plants so Ukraine can never use the materials to make nuclear weapons. There's 2 elements that you can use to make nuclear weapons. And I think most people are familiar with uranium. This is 92 on the periodic table of elements. Uranium is the heaviest naturally occurring element. So uranium just exists in the wild. It was created, whenever a star blows up. But the other fissile material that you can use to make a nuclear weapon is plutonium. Plutonium is not naturally occurring. Plutonium only exists if we create it in a nuclear reactor. So if you enrich uranium, you can make a big bomb. You can make a hydrogen bomb or whatever. But if you just have plutonium, and you want to, you can make a nuclear weapon. It's not going to be the yield and strength of a hydrogen bomb, but it's good enough to destroy Nagasaki in 1945. Fat Man was a plutonium bomb, and plutonium is a byproduct of civilian nuclear power. So if Ukraine wanted to get a nuclear weapon, a low-yield atomic weapon, this technology and this design has been around since 1945. Everyone in the world knows about it. This is the Fat Man bomb dropped on Nagasaki. So at the moment, Putin is trying to convince Trump to disarm Ukraine, to prevent them from ever building a nuclear weapon to defend themselves. That is what is currently happening here. And the timing of this is not a coincidence. I can show you this tweet. This is from March 14th. This is a member of Ukraine's parliament, Alexei Goncharenko. This is what members of Ukraine's parliament are calling for this week. Ukraine's ascension to NATO is no longer under consideration, according to Secretary General Rutte. Let me remind you of the words that I said earlier. We will either have NATO or nuclear weapons. Since we no longer have NATO, we need nuclear weapons. There is no other option. This is Putin and Trump working together to take away Ukraine's last remaining option for their own security. Let me go through the other headlines. Every day, Trump just does what Russia wants. Putin pressures Trump to recognize annexed Ukrainian territories. I think at some point in the next couple of weeks, Trump is going to formally recognize Crimea as being Russian territory. And then maybe a couple weeks later, he'll recognize the other 4 oblasts as well. Trump shuts program tracking Russia's abduction of Ukrainian children. The Yale-based task force tracking deported Ukrainian children lost its funding, blocking access to key evidence as experts warn of more than 35,000 abducted Ukrainian minors by Russia. Another unconscionable result, U.S. Democrats demand answers on deletion of Russian war crimes data. So these are Democratic members of Congress raising the alarm that Doge or whoever, Elon Musk, deliberately deleted all the data so that nobody in the future can help find these children, track them down, return them to their families. We have reason to believe that the data from the repository has been permanently deleted. This is according to Congressman Greg Landsman of Ohio. Now, the State Department is denying it, saying we didn't delete any of the data. But my government is full of liars who are all working for the Russians. So, was the data deleted? Can it be transferred to a different nonprofit or government or organization to continue this work? And I don't know. I don't think anybody in the Trump administration wants to cooperate. U.S. may relinquish leadership of NATO's European Command. Yeah, I think this is going to happen later this year. So the Secretary General of NATO is always a European, but the Supreme Allied Commander of Europe is always an American. This tradition goes all the way back to General Dwight D. Eisenhower. He was the first Supreme Allied Commander of NATO. And the current one is this guy, General Christopher Cavoli. And he's been in the position for almost 3 years. Around 3 years is typically how long these commanders serve. And I think when his term expires, Trump is just going to say, we're not going to replace this guy. If the Europeans want to continue NATO, I guess they can appoint their own general. He'll either be French, British, Canadian, German, who knows. This probably is a good thing for as long as Trump remains president, because you can't trust or rely on the United States right now. We are not your ally. And to prove it, this is the U.S. Embassy in Moscow. And for the last 3 years, in a sign of protest against America, Putin had these symbols of his war, giant, letters positioned in front of the American embassy. And after this Trump-Putin phone call, Putin decided to take the letters down. So Putin has taken down the letters of hostility, letters of war from the American embassy, and instead they're putting up a hashtag that reads, "We are together." So this is the Russians installing a giant monument, I don't know what it's called, that reads hashtag "We are together." The United States and Russia. This is the reality we now live in 2025, guys. I'm sorry. I am so sorry. So we need Ukraine and Europe to carry on the game plan. And the game plan is the same as it was 3 months ago. We need some kind of economic or political collapse inside of Russia in order for Ukraine to survive, to win this war. The expression, as long as it takes, we've been going for 3 years. And no one knows really how much gas Russia has left in the tank. How much longer can their economies survive under the extreme circumstances they've had imposed on them? Now, Donald Trump is going to do everything he can to help Russia, to save their economy and save Putin's regime, but Donald Trump is an idiot, and he's incompetent, and he actually might make the situation economically worse for Russia with his own disastrous policies on tariffs. So Ukraine has to continue to fight. They have to continue to resist. Europe has to continue to support them. And on the battlefield, things are still pretty good for Ukraine. Explosions and fire reported at Russia's Engels 2 strategic bomber base after a drone assault. I guess Ukraine might temporarily agree to this ceasefire on energy sites, so let's hit a weapons depot. This is the Engels air base. It's been struck numerous times. And that is a mushroom cloud from an ammunition depot at an air base blowing up. This is a pretty big explosion. I'll link the video down below if you want to see it for yourself. There's also this video on the ground next to the depot, and you can hear the pop, pop, pop of all the secondary explosions going off. I mean, if Ukraine just focuses on this for the next 30 days and they don't target depots and refineries, there's still plenty of targets for Ukraine's drones in the short term. Other bad news for Russia, a Russian Mi-28 helicopter crashed in the Leningrad region. Both of the pilots died. Ukraine had nothing to do with this. Russia's just falling apart. The Aski refinery in the Kemerov region caught fire. This refinery is 3,000 kilometers from Ukraine's border. I don't think Ukraine had anything to do with this. Things in Russia just frequently catch on fire. Public donations to the Russian war effort have recently collapsed, according to unhappy Russian war bloggers. They blame this development on the current talks between Putin and Trump, which seems to have convinced many Russians that peace is imminent. The war blogger 13th writes, in view of the empty talk about the allegedly upcoming truces, all this has had a significant impact on the aid to the front. The collection has noticeably fallen. In fact, for each necessary position, we have to find funds with difficulty. So an ironic outcome of Trump being so pro-Russian is lots of individuals are donating to Ukrainian funds and war-fighting efforts. And on the other side, fewer Russians are now donating or volunteering because they think the war is going to be over soon. Which it's not. This war, I don't think, is going to end anytime soon, guys. VK reports triple net losses despite record revenue in 2024. The Russian tech giant VK posted a staggering net loss of $1.12 billion in 2024. How is this possible? How can they have record revenue and still triple their losses? And it's because of inflation. Because of inflation, they're charging more, but their expenses because of inflation have gone up faster than the revenue that they can generate. This is not just happening for VK, this is happening for all Russian companies as Russia's economy is experiencing horrendous inflation. This is good news for Europe. Serbia's government resigns as Vučić floats idea of fresh elections. There was a massive, more than 1 million person protest in Belgrade last week, and the government of Serbia, the prime minister, resigned. Now, Vučić, he's the president. He's the one who's pro-Russia and in charge of the country, and he's saying that they might have to have elections in June, which would be a year and a half prior to when they were previously going to have elections. Are these free and fair elections in Serbia? And I don't really know enough about Serbia's internal corruption, but if we can flip Serbia, if we can get Serbia to normalize and stop threatening their neighbors, I imagine that would be good for peace in Europe. The Baltics and Poland have officially left the Anti-Personnel Landmine Convention. This is the Ottawa Convention. Poland and the Baltics are planning to mine their borders with Russia and Belarus because Poland and the Baltics anticipate they're going to be invaded by the Russians in the next couple years. So they're now planting down as many anti-personnel landmines as they can along their borders with Russia and Belarus. Let's get to the good news for Ukraine. British Special Forces reportedly on standby for Ukraine deployment. If there is a full ceasefire across the front lines. There's a coalition of the willing being led by the UK who are going to immediately send peacekeeping forces to Ukraine. Russia is saying they'll never agree to this, they don't want this, but I think we're in the era of just doing whatever we want. Don't listen to the Russians, don't listen to Trump and his government. Ukraine and Europe, you just have to do whatever you think is best going forward. Zelensky confirms new arrival of F-16 jets to Ukraine. Most of these jets are coming from Denmark or Belgium and the Netherlands, and yeah, they're mostly being used for air defense at the moment. Every time Russia launches drones and missiles, F-16s take off and they shoot them down mid-air. But eventually, they could be used on the front lines in offensive operations. Final couple clips I want to play for you. Ukraine brings home 175 prisoners of war. These pictures and videos are always positive, heartwarming to see these heroes being released from captivity. And I'll play for you two of these clips. Here's the first one.
Скільки часу ви були в полоні?
2 роки, 8 місяців і 19 днів.
Як ви дізналися? Коли ви дізналися, що вас нарешті міняють, ви їдете додому?
18 числа був дежурним по камері в Башкирстані і цей. І от не знаю, нормальні літаками летіли, білоруси в Гомелі нас вже поміняли. Ну я надіявся, що вже літаками, ну не знав точно, але ну ми дуже раді.
Які були
Нас
ваші?
дуже гарно зустрічають, приємно, взагалі, емоції. Ну, радий, подзвонив вже до дочки, дякувати Богу, що всі живі, внуки. Мати, будь ласка, нас привезли. Приємно, приємно. Дай Боже, все буде, Україна буде, все буде. Тварі вони.
Everything will be Ukraine. Here's another clip of a defender who got to go home and talk to his family.
Я обіцянку стримав. Я обіцяв, що вернусь. Я повернувся. Ми вірні завжди. Все буде.
А я вам вдячна за сина. Я вам дуже вдячна за сина. Це герой. Це мій товариш. Зараз він вам сам набере, добре?
Welcome home, heroes. That's all for this update video. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. If you found this video informative, give me a thumbs up. Best way to support the channel. Comments and questions, let me know down below. I love hearing from you guys. Till the next video, keep defending the truth, keep defending democracy.